Well, hello, everyone. I am Shasta May Hernandez, your non-binary spirit guide, pronouns they, them, their, and I am here with my beautiful friend Eli Raymer, who is joining us today to have a nice chat and to share with us a bit of their storytelling wisdom. Eli, it would do me the honors if you would give me a moment to read the bio that you sent to me to introduce you, and then I would love to hear a bit more from you. So, Eli Raymer, who publishes under the name of Andrew Raymer, is the author and co-author of 18 published books. He graduated from UC Berkeley in 1973 with a degree in religious studies, is a certified body-centered therapist, and was ordained a Maggid, a sacred storyteller in the Jewish tradition, in 2012. He has been teaching movement and meditation since the 1980s in the gay, queer, and wider community, and his work at this time is about helping us to heal and grow spirituality in the face of increasing climate change, war, and social conflicts. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
being.
you.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me and getting to spend time together, which I always love doing because you're such a wise old soul. And I often say to my students who are much younger than me, I may be biologically the oldest person in the room, but some of you are way older than me. Ground yourself in that wisdom because we need it.
Mm, yes. Yes. Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
You don't
So it's
have my
okay if I
breath.
keep calling you grandma now? So grandma, I'm just a little kid here today.
Well, please share with us your wisdom, youth. Eli, as I have gotten to know you, I have very much enjoyed this dance of the ages, is what I'm feeling called to call it in this moment. In that we can honor the youth, we can honor the old soul, we can honor the higher self, and all the spectrum in between, right? And beyond. And I would say that's one of the gifts of knowing you. And I have greatly appreciated that about you from day one. From day one, you have brought that energy. So,
Yes, we
uh,
met in a Zoom class some years ago, and the first time we looked at each other, what were there, 100 other people on the screen? It was like, just like this amazing click. And I think that's important in this challenging time with what's going on environmentally, climate change, politically, that we wander in the world with a really deep sense of recognition of who we're meeting and the complexity of it. And so often I annoy people by saying, when you're out in the world, don't listen to music, don't listen to podcasts. If you have to talk on the phone, sit down. Be aware of the world, every tree you pass, every person you pass, and every tree you pass. Touch every tree you pass. I say to students, just for a moment and caress it and say, thank you for being here. Thank you for breathing with me for our dance that we've been doing for millennia. Um, I particularly invite people to notice every little kid and every baby that they pass and to send them loving energy and support. Because, I'm 74. I won't be here to see a lot of the really scary things. But what I know is that lots of those little kids will be. And what I also know is that they signed up knowing what they were getting into. Some 4 or 5 years ago, friends of mine had a baby. When they put him in my lap for the first time, I looked down with this kind of look of concern and pain. And he sent me this very clear message: don't worry about me. I signed up for this on purpose. I know what I'm getting into. I came here to make a difference. And I see this with little kids. I see more little kids in strollers making really clear eye contact who are present than I've ever seen in my life before. And so it's important when we're out to look at them and say, oh, wait, I think I remember you from a past life in, was it West Africa 5,000 years ago? And they look up and kind of nod, yes. So this is some of what I invite people to do is to move in the world this way.
Mm. Yes, I agree, you do. You, I will say you helped me deepen into gratitude with that kind of presence. Mindfulness is where we met, and you expanded that with that gratitude, like you said, thanking or touching the trees, right? And thanking your environment, being present with your environment. I was able to deepen into that through gratitude, and that was in a practice that I started with you. And it has really helped transform my world. And I love what you touched on at the end there about how you're meeting these beings here, though also with this knowing that you may have met them in another life. And I know that you and I both believe in reincarnation, and you have helped me deepen further into my past life journeys, some of them anyway. And I know my old soul self has been through quite a bit to get to this point, and yours as well, as I've read in your book, The Urban Mystic. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience of that as a being coming into this world yourself, as you started narrating that in your book in the beginning. But if you can kind of touch on that for people who have not really have not read your book yet because it's not out yet.
No, I think it'll be out later in the year. Tales of an Urban Mystic. Well, about 6 or 8 months ago, I watched a talk by someone whose name I can't remember, who's been interviewing kids who remember past lives since 1998. And one of the things that he discovered in a culture that doesn't encourage belief in this or memory of it is that around the age of 3, those memories start to shut down. So I remember as far back as age 3, multiple past lives. And I learned at a very early age not to talk about them. But I deeply believe that we all have them. I don't think there's a single person on planet Earth who's living their first life. So what we've brought with us is enormous. I was listening some years ago to someone else whose name I don't remember, and psychic who said that the average person has lived around 30,000 lives on this planet. So whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. But given that we've been here for a few million years, it's a lot of lives, even if it's 10. And when we sit in that sense, it expands who we are. It expands how we move. It expands who we connect with. And what I like to say to people is, you may not consciously believe in this, but there are clues in your life that you never thought of as clues before. So you grew up in a very traditional um, Irish American family. As far back as you can remember in your life, you have loved uh, Argentinian food, Japanese art, and stories from South Africa. Why? Your parents didn't raise you with those things. You grew up in a very, very traditional Muslim family somewhere. You have been obsessed since you were little with Native American culture. Why? You grew up in a Chinese American family that's been here for 100 years, and you got a PhD in French. Why? Those are clues, and we all have them. When we are walking around the giant food bar in a restaurant, Why does someone go to this and someone go to that? There's something calling us to, oh, I'm going to have the lasagna today. No, I'm going to have the samosas today. And so you invite people to really look at what are the things you never thought of were important,
Mm,
because they're doorways into your past lives.
mm,
I've remembered, as I said, as far back as age 3, I remembered multiple past lives. And I grew up in a very poor family where my brother and I shared a tiny little bedroom in a 3-room apartment where our parents slept in the living room behind a bookcase. And I remember living in a jungle, living on an island, living in this enormous house, unlike any house I had ever seen. Um, I remember multiple languages, awake and asleep. And I know I'm not unique because I've now met in the course of my life hundreds of other people who have these experiences, which you and I have talked about before. So, to the people who are watching and listening, take a moment to think about this. If you haven't thought about it before, and look around where you're sitting. Oh, I love Renaissance art. Chinese landscape paintings. Love them. Look out the window and think, what are the things you love to grow that don't come from where you grew up? These are clues. So if that's helpful, that's some of where I invite people to explore.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. That is, I think that's very helpful. It was something that helped me. And I think also, as I've met many people along their journey, it's looking for the synchronicities, right? Those things that tie you to another thing. And if you are interested in doing past life work, is I think something that you really can expand into. And even just play, like with an energy of play and curiosity, it doesn't have to be where you have this aha moment of, okay, this is my past life, here's everything. But if it happens to be that for you, I think it's beautiful. And I love that you have this way of just using mindfulness as a way to notice and observe. And without this kind of like judgment or real seeking or observing, just kind of sitting back. And it kind of leaves a lot of space for that play, for that curiosity, and just allowing what's meant to come. And I think that's really beautiful because it moves from a place of surrender, and really just ease, which is really nice, in my opinion. Um, and I would love to hear a little bit more about maybe some of the lessons that you feel you've taken away from your past lives, maybe one in particular that sticks out for you that has helped you in this lifetime to move differently, to think differently, to change your perspective in some way.
Yeah. I mentioned before having these memories at age 3 of living in a gigantic house, bigger than any house I had ever seen in my life. And people speaking a language I'd never heard. We had servants. I didn't know what a servant was. And I remember once being around 4 and asking my mother what happened to my other parents, and the look of rage on her face was such that I shut down. But when I was in my middle 20s, I was breaking up with a boyfriend. It was very painful. And we were on the phone one day and I was crying and I said to him, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me." And he yelled at me on the phone. And you have to remember, this is back in the days when the phone is attached by a cord to the wall and you hold it. There's a thing by your ear, a thing in your mouth. I'm holding the phone. He's holding the phone a few blocks away. This is Brooklyn, New York. And he yells at me when I said, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me." He yells at me. "No, it isn't." Slams down the receiver on the phone. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed and the energy pushed me back. So my feet were on the floor. The energy pushed my back on the bed. And for possibly the next 20 minutes of world clock time, I watched that life unfold. So I was back in the big house. And suddenly and they were my parents and my grandparents and my older half sisters and servants. And at that point in my life, I knew that the language they were all speaking was German, which I hadn't heard when I was 3. And at one point, my father sits down and says, "We have to move out of the house." And all of this is happening. I am aware as the 26 or so year old watching this movie unfold that I'm living in Nazi Germany. And we go into hiding. My father and my mother's father and my father's mother, and my 2 half sisters weren't living with us, didn't come, never saw them again. I watched this story unfold, Shasta, of our going into hiding, of our being found out, of our being carted off, of our locked up, being packed into boxcars, carted off to a concentration camp, forced out. I watched myself die
Mm.
in a gas chamber as a little 6-year-old boy. And what was so amazing was I experienced, I'm using this body, but of course it was a different body, as if my soul rose up, connected to my heart, rose up a little bit out of that body, got pulled back in. Then the next time it rose up a little bit higher. Then it rose up out of the ceiling of the gas chamber. And it was a gorgeous day. Oh my God, was it a gorgeous spring, magnificent day. Then I rose up again, even higher, back in my body. And then I rose up, and something in his heart, my heart, and that body snapped, and I was in another domain. And a luminous being met me, who only later I realized was my guardian angel, and she led me to what I'm going to call heaven.
Mm.
And I'm in a garden, and to this day, I can't explain what was in the garden. I don't know if I've ever talked about this with you before,
Mm.
but everything in the garden was, every color of everything was gold. I can't explain this any better, but the orange that's on your dress is different than the green that's next to it. It's different than the blue on your shoulder. The gold, so I'm in a garden. The gold of the tree trunk is as different from the gold of the green leaves as the colors are on your dress or the colors are, in my kippah. I can't explain it ever, but everything was golden and luminous. And I'm led up to this very old bearded man sitting on a bench who says to me something, not in English or German or telepathically. Do you realize that you're dead? Yes, I do. He says, given everything that you've gone through, you know that you don't have to go back. And I said, well, yeah, but look at what's going on down there. I have to go back. And then I can't explain this as if there was a gigantic computer, like shuffling information of every single past life karma connection I had with anyone alive on the planet.
Mm.
Thousands of things are moving all around me. And then it all stops, and 3 couples, binary heterosexual couples, appear. One of them in England, one of them in Indonesia, and one of them the parents that I chose.
Mm.
And I was told you could pick any of these. And I felt the karma that I had with all of them.
Mm.
But over the years, I've regretted sometimes that I didn't pick the really rich family in Indonesia, that I didn't pick the really well connected family in England. I look at what my writer life would have been like in that culture. But I saw my father in this life sitting in a uniform, military uniform, Second World War. He's in Europe, sitting on the steps somewhere. And I looked at him and I thought, that man is so filled with dreams. I want him.
Mm.
And he came with my mother. They had, my mother was 14 and my father was 16 when they became lovers.
Mm.
And they married when my father got back from the Second World War. And I was born like 4 years later. Um, so they came together. I had karma with them. So there's more conversation that I don't remember. And then what happens is my little 6-year-old body melts down or melts out into this enormous sphere of light. This is a long story. Is this okay?
Yes, keep
So
going. Yes.
my little, his name was Yosef. I don't know what his last name was, but his name was Yosef. And he turns into this big sphere of light. And there's like over the garden, like a kind of like an eye opens. And I float out of this eye and I come down to earth. And I'm in a room and I'm bigger than the bed that my parents are lying in making love. My parents in this life. They're making love inside my energy body. And after my father ejaculates, I shrink down to become a little sphere of light about the size of a softball, and I go into my mother's body. And then I come out of the experience, and I'm back in my bedroom, lying on the bed. It's like, oh my God. I think it was about 20 minutes of clock time. And I had to digest all of this. And then I got up and I called my mother. And she was at home and I got her. And I told her, which I didn't often tell my mother things like this. I told my mother the whole story. And I described the room. And I said, so you and dad were making love in a bed, and it had a corduroy headboard on it, which was the one that I remember. Did you have that before I was born? And my mother said, yes. My father's mother had made it for them. And I said, and the bed was pushed all the way in the corner of the room. My mother says, no, it wasn't. And we talked about it a little, and she had to go, and I went, and it's like, okay, was this a delusion?
Mm.
Maybe. Because they were living in a studio apartment that I never saw in the building that I did live until I was 5. But they moved to a bigger, a one-bedroom apartment when, after I was born or around the time I was born. So okay, some of it I got, some of it I didn't. Maybe 2 weeks later, I'm home and the phone rings and I pick it up. It's my mother and she says, describe everything about the room again. And I did. And I said, the bed was shoved all the way in the corner. And my mother says, you're right. She said, when we knew that we wanted to start a family, we're out one day and your father saw a desk that he really liked. And we brought it home. But because we lived in a tiny studio apartment, the room wasn't big enough for the desk to fit in. So we had to move the bed all the way into the corner instead of the middle of the wall. But because we lived there for like 3 or 4 years and the bed was in the middle of the wall and only a few months, I forgot. You're right. The bed was in the corner.
Mm.
So at some point, a few weeks later, I called my mother's husband, my stepfather, and he had been a Nazi prisoner of war. And I described what it was like to be in the boxcar. And I said, like way up, there was like these windows. And he said, no, I was in a lot of boxcars. It wasn't like that. And then the same thing happens. He calls me a week later and he says, describe it again. I did. And he said, how old were you? And I said, 6. He said, you're right. He said, there were these windows in the boxcars and they were adult eye level. So I didn't have to look up at it. But if you're 6, you had to look way up. You're right. So it was this amazing confirmation of this incredible transformative experience and a very long story that stays with me to this day. And this is now, I think, about 50 years after that awakening happened. And I've met over the years people who have experiences like this, who remember dying in concentration camps, dying in, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, all kinds of horrible things that people remember. And one of the important reasons to open up to past life experience is that it's planet Earth. We all bring trauma with us. And so I've had this experience, and maybe you have too, and listeners, where you know two kids who are identical twins. Same parents, same house, same food, same teachers, same everything. And they're identical. I mean, I've known identical twins where you could hardly tell them apart. But who they are is so different because they came from different past lives. And what they brought with them is often very different. So the loving, warm parents for one child felt tender and loving. But for the other child who came in from a really scary life and didn't want to be touched, it's hard. And so we carry these patterns, and they're going to make a difference, as I said before, as we journey into an even more challenging future. So, what is the wisdom we brought with us? What are the things that keep us from being really present? I chose to come back, but you know what? My last life was so awful that I don't really actually want to be here. It's something that I've heard a lot. So it's a doorway. It's not the doorway for everybody, but I think it is an important and useful doorway to open.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I'm glad that you did. I learned some new things from you, some part of your story that I had not known myself
Sure.
before. So I am very appreciative that you shared. And interesting, the thing that sparked you to go into that past life um, felt so painful. And I wonder, have you gone into other past lives in that same manner, meaning something, painful or powerful happened to you, and then you remembered a past life, or were they more quite casual, how did they differ, I guess, for you?
Well, I've never had an experience like that again, but it opened wide in the like 25, 26-year-old me that made it easier for me to access other past lives. But often in the course of my life, I meet someone and I feel this incredible connection. And now I think, oh, it's not the first time we're meeting. And I've had other people say that to me. And on a few occasions, I remember spontaneous memories of past lives.
Mm.
So one, I remember sitting, if you know San Francisco, in Dolores Park with a former boyfriend. And the same thing happened to both of us at the exact same moment. We're sitting there, it's 10, 12 years ago, on the grass or a bench, I can't remember, looking at each other. And I looked at him and he looked at me. We both said at the same time, oh my God, you're wearing a turban. You're wearing a turban. And we walked back into a past life somewhere in the Middle East where I can't remember if I was younger and he was older, something like that. But one of us went off to war and died, but we were lovers as two men in that life. Um, Probably my favorite story like that. I don't have a lot of spontaneous ones, but my mother came from a very communist, socialist, anti-unspiritual Jewish family. And much later in life, she had a teacher who was Navajo who opened the door to spirituality for her. But that wasn't there before. So she came to visit me. I'm living in Brooklyn, and I lived in this little two-room apartment. So we're sitting in the kind of kitchen next to the room where I fell on the bed and had that experience. My mother clue. Very traditional Jewish family, loved Japanese art and pottery from an early age. So did my dad. Some past life that they had. So about a week before my mother came to visit, I had gone to an art street fair, and I bought two little Japanese teacups, little raku teacups. And we're sitting at the table, and I have a teapot, like a ceramic teapot. It wasn't Japanese, very modern looking. And we're sitting, my mom and I, across from each other. I'd made a pot of tea, and it's steeping. And I go to fill up a cup, and as I hand it to my mother, and my mother takes it from the other side of the table, she says, "Something weird is happening."
Mm.
Like, yeah, she said, "The room is dissolving." Yeah. Um, if we had already drunk the tea, my mother might have said, "Did you put LSD in here?" But I didn't. I've never taken that. And we walk ourselves through this memory. My mother says, "Well, not me, I'm an old man. And you're not you, you're around your age, but you're a young man." And she says, "I was a pottery master in Japan, and you were one of my students. And each time you made a cup, you would bring it to me, and I would say, it's not quite ready yet to like glaze and fire, make another one. And one day you came and you handed me a cup, and I said, yes, now you're ready. This is good enough." And when she said that, I remembered that moment in that past life, and we were back in my kitchen, Carroll Street, Park Slope, Brooklyn.
Wow.
So I have a feeling that these memories are available to everyone.
Mm.
That something odd starts to happen. You're sitting with somebody, and but there's like a moment of disorientation. But in this culture, we're not taught to follow that. It's like, come back to the room, be present, be here. And so often I invite people to say, pause for a moment and think, what's going on? Maybe something else is happening. Maybe the person I'm on a date with, and we're eating in a Korean restaurant. Neither of us are Korean. In fact, this is our first time either of us have ever been in a Korean restaurant. Feels like home. The smell is so good. And let's not run away from this moment of something opening, because we're going to remember that 400 years ago, we were something, lovers, parent, child, siblings, neighbors, enemies.
Mm.
So it means slowing down and noticing the moment where something might shift. And in our culture, it's like, oh, close that up.
Yeah. What a shift from the mother that you knew when you were born to that moment of her experiencing that past life with you and then telling you about it. Um, and I think also I just want to circle back to your other story to honor your bravery and even telling your mother about your experience when you had not ever told her about those things since your childhood, and honoring how much courage it does take to bring these topics up to people who may not be open to hearing about these things, and how it can feel, on a personal level. I have felt like I might be labeled certain things, right? Crazy is the main one. Um, and in my own experience of sharing my most recent past life experience with my mother, there was a tremendous amount of shame that also came through. Um, Her and I had already navigated the crazy word years before, but in actually sharing that particular instance, personally, I was feeling that and had to process through that on my own. She was open to hearing and asking me and curious, and it was an incredibly liberating experience.
Mhm.
And I just want to honor that too for people who may be watching this as well. If you have been wanting to share your experiences with other people, loved ones or otherwise, or in moments, like you're saying, Eli, I had never got to the point where I was sharing what was happening in real time with people. as you're speaking about your spontaneous experiences with moving into past lives with other people in the moment, I have experienced that, but I haven't known how to talk about it. I didn't feel comfortable or brave enough to bring it up. And I think maybe if I did, at least with a couple of people that I remember being on dates with, I think they would have been open to it, you know? I just didn't in the moment have that gut feeling to really open up about it. And I believe maybe if we did more, it might bring some more normalized conversation around these things and help create spaces where we are able to openly talk about this from a place of curiosity and love, you know, because this is a part of our human experience as well. Whether you believe it or not, it is happening to people. They are experiencing it. And so I think it's important to at least stay open. And I appreciate you sharing so much about these experiences and how they've not only impacted you personally, but how they've opened space in your relationships for other people to experience these too. And I think as we move forward in the future, that's more and more what it can be about, right? Is creating space, opening spaces for others to feel like they can share what they're truly going through and still be loved, you know, still be seen and understood and heard, and validated. I think I remember you saying as you were describing that story, how much confirmation it was for you when your mother told you that you were right. And if you hadn't shared, maybe you would have kept looking for that confirmation in other ways, and how beautiful it is for you to have that experience. And then now to be here sharing about that with me and with the people that are viewing this. So I greatly applaud your courage because it is something that I think is necessary, not just in talking about past lives or our personal spiritual experiences, but courage to stay, courage to be here, courage to want to be present
Mhm.
for all the things that comes with this life here in this now. Um, so applauding you.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm wondering when you were getting ready to talk about it with your mother and deciding, I'm going to do this, was there a languaging, a presentation that you offered that might be useful to listeners today that worked for you? Because you didn't know. I mean, your mother could have said, I knew you were crazy, and this confirms it.
Yeah. Um, Gosh, that's a great question. I did think about what I said before I said it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm a thinker.
Mhm.
And as I said, we did navigate the crazy realm years prior, so I had fear bringing up the topic again, or not the topic. The label previous label was over another issue, but that my mother had at the time. But bringing up this past life experience, I focused more on connecting with her and wanting to understand who she was and who my father was at the time of my birth in this life. Um, and as I've shared with you my most recent past life experience, I remembered that whole life. I died when I was 4. I remember the death, and my death was traumatic. I was drowned in a bathtub by my caretaker, my babysitter, and then woke up as the newborn in this life. And in an entirely other experience, I did experience my birth into this life. I experienced being in my mother's womb and actually being birthed, and I experienced all the emotions that she was feeling during my pregnancy and during my birth. So I had a lot of questions around what was going on in her life. And I felt it was important for me to be vulnerable, extremely vulnerable in what I was currently going through, which was I had just experienced my most recent past life, processing through that, what that meant for me, what the lessons I was taking away from that, while also knowing what I came into this life with, what I walked into this life feeling feelings that I did not feel were mine, and
Mhm.
wanting to understand my birth story, wanting to understand a person, my mother, that I felt like I didn't really know growing up. And so I sent her a text, which she doesn't really like.
Mhm.
Um, but it was my way. I prefer to write often when I'm really wanting to be conscientious about my communication.
Mhm.
So I wrote her a message very simply, and I just asked if she had some time to talk about um, a previous life experience that I was processing through and my birth story because I wanted to understand her and I wanted to connect with her because I missed her. And I think the part for me at the end was admitting that I missed her.
Mhm.
At the time, we had been estranged. And so I felt it was important to be completely honest about what I wanted to have a conversation about and also admit my feelings.
Mhm.
Because I wasn't going to be able to show up to the call otherwise myself. And I wanted her to be able to make an informed decision about if she was really going to be able to show up to this call as well. Um, and she sent me a message back, saying, of course we can talk about whatever you'd like. And then we did. We had this very difficult for me conversation. And I shared a lot of what I had experienced, and then she shared. She shared a lot about what was going on around the time of my conception and my birth. And I actually learned that she had to take herself to the hospital, and she gave birth to me alone in a room with,
Mhm.
the medical caretakers um, at the time. And there were a lot of other things going on around my mother's life at that time, with her relationship with my father that contributed to a lot of the fear and anger that I entered this world with,
Mhm.
that I felt within her womb. Um, and it really helped, I think, to foster a new place to relate to my mother from. I think she started to see me differently
Mhm.
after that, but in a different way than our previous experience. uh, so, yeah, it was an interesting conversation, and it helped me learn a lot about um, just reaching out and being honest about what it is that I want and not expecting really anything in return. And I got a whole lot more.
Uh, that's wonderful. And I think that's a good guide for your watchers and listeners that this is possible. Because from what you've said a little bit in the past about your mom, this might not have been the first person that I would think you could sit down with and say, hey, by the way, I want to talk about a past life. But there is a way, and I think on some deep soul level, she knows who you are, that you're a wise elder. And there must be the wise elder in her that you picked her for, even if that's hard for her to access sometimes now. And it's hard for all of us to access. So there's a really nice dance that you shared with us of what's possible that we might not think is possible. And sometimes it won't be. And there will be parents who will say, I don't want to hear that. You're crazy. Um, and one of the things I've noticed in the course of my life, which is interesting, is often two people meet and there's this incredible bond. And I've had this, years ago, I went to a psychic about someone who I met and fell in love with who said, you have a lot of past life karma. And so you feel all of this energy and you think, oh my God, this is love. But actually, this is someone you are not supposed to be with in this life. And you're blinding yourself, deafening yourself, closing yourself down to, I remember the psychic saying this, she said it very clearly, you're closing yourself down to what's actually going on because you feel this deep soul connection, but it's actually negative. And I've done this a few times in my life because I didn't get that. That deep connection doesn't always necessarily mean life partner. Might mean we came together to actually work through things and say goodbye. So it's more complicated sometimes than we think.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely had those experiences as well. And I know of many people who have had that as well. And learning the discernment about the types of connections that are meant to be fostered and nurtured and stay in your life versus the ones that are karmic and meant to learn a lesson and to move on.
Uh,
Um, and I think in my journey, it was oftentimes admitting that I was wrong about certain people and being okay with that. And then opening again, because you do end up closing yourself off, believing a story about what that could be. And interestingly, I will say for myself, um, there have been moments where I have followed synchronicities to people and they led to, a deep connection in the very moment that we met. And then I found myself, I will say, I think I was bored and I wanted to follow the story, if you will. Um, and I learned in those instances, a lot of it was because I wasn't truly just really diving into my own path. I wasn't really ready to step into my own path and I wanted to be distracted at a certain level.
oh,
And I had to really call myself out on those things, those moments. And just own that and get it together, pour into myself, and really connect deeper into my own spiritual practice, my own soul's path. And it opened new doors and depth of relationship for the ones that are meant to stay. And I think that there's a lot of beauty in that too. Um, the connections that continue, continuous connection. Um,
yeah.
but I also wanted to touch on very quickly, my mind is going back to a thought that you, or an idea that you brought up that I also believe in terms of the parent relationship. Oh gosh, now I'm wanting to share, and it's my mind is starting to take it away. Maybe I'm not meant to share it in this moment.
Maybe it will come back. We never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. I'm gonna let it be there then.
Good, good, good. Yeah.
Mm.
It's just we're always living in such a dance of things. I keep looking and I don't know if you can see this, but I'm trying to get my finger to go there. Can you see that there's a little gingerbread
Yeah.
cookie cutter sitting
Oh, it's a cookie
right
cutter. Okay.
next to the stove? So
Yeah.
that belonged to my mother's mother.
Mm.
And one of my cousins was pretty sure it's more than 100 years old. I don't know that. But what are the objects around us that are part of our story?
Mm.
Not just the people. What is the information that's talking to us? You walk into a thrift store and something calls out to you. Um, I haven't had a pet in a long time, but I walked into a thrift store and well, maybe 2 years ago, and I saw on a shelf a little sign that said vintage glass,
Mm.
$6. And I bought this little dog. His name is Jester. And he's such a part of my life. And he opens a doorway into possibility for me. I don't have a dog right now. I don't make cookies right now.
Mm.
But in the people that are with us, listening, watching. Again, I want you to invite yourself to notice, where am I sitting and what's around me? Can we be as embodied as possible in this challenging time and yet be as expansive as we can be into the enormous history of who we are? That we're all millions of years old. That even just in our biology and our DNA, forget past lives, we're old. We have little voices going back to the very first life that evolved on planet Earth. And we need to own that as climate change gets worse. I read that there are half as many animals living in the wild as they were in 1970.
Mm.
What does that mean for our grandchildren?
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the silver linings that I felt came from 2020 was that a lot of our natural areas and animal wildlife was able to just be for a moment. Some even to repopulate in small ways. Um, and what an impact moments like that can have. Um, and what it will really mean to pour into climate change more, to pour into how we can better relate to the planet while also understanding that the earth itself is finite. It is a physical object, as our own lives in this now are as well as human beings. And so, how can we honor the give and the take, right? A bit more, the reciprocity of it a bit more. And I know there are many initiatives that are looking for sweeping changes and to make sustainable, lasting impact, and those are important as well. But as individuals, what can we do to honor that reciprocity daily and not just as a spiritual practice? It can be that as well, but just as human beings, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's such an important inquiry pattern. It brings me back to this place of just inviting people who are with us to say, in whatever words work for you, I am an ancient embodied earth sage. I'm 18 years old, but I'm actually an elder. I'm 27 and I'm ancient. I'm youthful. I'm ancient. I'm alive. I'm here. I chose to come in. Amongst my spirit guides, a number of the things that they've said to me over the years are one of the very creative choices that some people make is to enter an incarnation where they know they'll be adopted.
Mm.
So that you're getting bio information from one lineage, but you're getting social information, educational information from another one.
Mm.
And increasingly, what I'm seeing is that more and more people are coming in who are gender fluid and non-binary because we've all lived so many thousands of lives in the binary world as women and men, in addition to the lives that we've lived in between all along in cultures that recognize them where we didn't have to hide. But I think it's going to get harder and harder to just live in the binary. So I read not too long ago in the New York Times that 26% of all 20 somethings identify as non binary. Now, maybe that would have been the case when I was that age in the 70s, but that wasn't in the realm of possibility yet culturally. But we're in this amazing time of transformation. And if you're here and you're with us, you're part of this story. So, thanks for joining us. And just take a moment again to ask yourself, what did I bring with me? What's around me? What are the clues? What am I looking at? What am I smelling? What am I not wanting to go near? What am I utterly craving to have for lunch right now that has nothing to do with my biology.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for bringing all that up. I think as we continue to evolve as a collective consciousness, there will be a lot more room to expand even within the non-binary, right? And
Yeah.
I love that you're bringing us back to presence here and in our bodies here and now. And I think with that, I'd like to close if you're feeling complete here. Um, I so appreciate you and your stories and your wisdom. Earth Sage, my beautiful Aries friend. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank all of you who are watching. I hope that you have gained something from this, and you feel a little bit more seen and validated in your own experience. Thank you for joining again, Eli. And I will go ahead and put your website link in the description box below if people would like to learn more about you and connect with you.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this, for opening a portal for possibility in such a challenging time. So I celebrate you, my wise young elder friend.
Mhm.
Big hug and lots of love and blessings to all of you out there.
Thank you.